You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and we have an update to a murder involving two football players of a high-profile college. This was back in 2006, and this twist that spurred the update is a wild one. Brian Pata was poor, the youngest of 9 children, growing up in Little Haiti, just north of Miami. But football appeared to be saving Brian. His humble mother, Jeanette, watched him excel at Miami Central High School. He was named a Super Preps All-American team and was even rated as the nation's 26th best defensive lineman. That happened in the early 2000s. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution named him as one of the top 100 high school football players in the South. And when it came time to choose a college football program, Brian was courted by Rutgers University, the University of Oklahoma, and the University of Florida. But he chose his hometown, the University of Miami. He was going to be a member of the elite squad of the Hurricanes. Brian excelled, playing almost 4 complete seasons for the Hurricanes as a defensive lineman. And he was big. Brian was 6'4", over 270 pounds, and was likely going to land in the 2nd or 3rd round of the NFL draft. This would be a dream come true, until a bullet ended not only his dreams, but his life as well. Now, time and context are important here. This is 2006, before NIL money was, being thrown around so easily in the college ranks. When college students had money in 2006, it usually meant it was through undisclosed deals, backroom handshakes, discussions that never happened but resulted in new cars or lavish jewelry or homes for mothers gripped with poverty. And although it isn't explained anywhere, Brian drove a black Infiniti QX56 sport utility vehicle with custom spinning rims that he reportedly got from a man he referred to as, quote, his guy. Now, he juggled his completion of his criminal justice degree with football and also a lively nightlife. When he wasn't club hopping, he was restoring and selling tricked out cars. Brian also kept a loaded handgun on his bedside table and a shotgun and AK-47, both loaded with chambered bullets, in his bedroom closet. Brian often drove around Miami with tape covering his license plate. All right, in his 4th fall season at Miami, Brian's personal life was becoming even more complicated. At 22 years old, he was looking at making some major money with a guaranteed NFL deal. He was telling everyone he was going to buy his mother a new home right there in Miami. That was the bright side to his senior year in college. But there seemed to be a dark side as well. He had recently been club hopping, and that night of alcohol-fueled partying ended with a brawl between gang members and a man issuing the threat to Brian that he promised to, quote, get him. The brawl broke apart when police pepper sprayed everyone. But magically, no one was arrested, and they were told to dust themselves off and not get caught next time. After that brawl, some of the teammates at the club reported that they had been getting calls warning them that someone had placed a hit out on Brian and also another teammate. During a different club brawl on a different night, Brian was at the center of a dispute over blinged out and possibly stolen car rims. So he's got that one going on. And then, in late October of 2006, Brian, while working his side gig of car parts and restoring of cars, sold a car to someone on eBay. 4 days after that transaction, the buyer contacted Brian, livid that he had been sold a lemon. The buyer filed a complaint with eBay, but the dispute could never be settled due to Brian's untimely death. And we've got all that going on, outside of his home. But back at his home, he's involved in a pretty turbulent relationship with a live-in girlfriend. That relationship was complicated because this woman had previously dated one of Brian's teammates, and that teammate had a bit of a temper on the field and in the locker room. All right, that live-in girlfriend, she also had some trouble following her because her twin brother had a documented history of violence and a somewhat crazy ex-girlfriend who had at one time shown up to Brian's house wielding a knife. Let's just say Brian and this on-again, off-again girlfriend, Jada, well, they're not spending their evenings in 2006 watching American Idol on TV and, making sure they voted for Chris Daughtry's performance. These two were clubbing, partying, dealing in questionable circles, and rubbing elbows with questionable people. They were breaking up and then getting back together and fighting endlessly and then making marriage plans. And both were the jealous type. And both were providing reasons for each other to be jealous. So you've got all the background on Brian. Let's just talk about the team for a minute. Because this team, well, they've got their violent and sketchy issues going on as well. In 2006, the Hurricanes, before the season even started, had a linebacker shot in the butt in his own front yard, all of this during a scuffle. Another teammate then grabbed a gun and returned fire. All of that happened before the season, like I said. But then in mid-October, which is mid-season for football, the team had such a nasty brawl on the field that 31 suspensions were handed out by college officials. For Brian, it seemed the danger was lurking just steps around him, but he kept dodging it until November 7th of 2006. That morning, Brian had an early morning workout and a team meeting. He and teammate Eric Moncoeur registered for the upcoming spring semester classes. Then the two joined Jada for lunch. By afternoon time, Brian had completed a successful team practice and had kind of lingered around the showers in the locker room after practice, eventually being one of the last to leave for the day. As teammate Chris Zellner was leaving the locker room, he heard Brian's end of a heated phone call. Brian's voice was raised, and Chris remembers him saying something like, "If you want me, man, then come see me." Brian eased his high-end SUV out of the parking lot at the school. He noticed several underclassmen waiting at the city bus stop. He stopped, offered them a ride to their apartments, and those friends remember Brian as being kind of level at that time and somewhat jovial during the ride. After dropping off the underclassmen, Brian called his brother as he drove the remaining distance to his apartment. Partway during that call, the phone went silent. His brother said that was strange, but he didn't really make anything of it. Near the same time as the call ended, Brian pulled into his assigned parking space near a dumpster in the apartment parking area. Now upstairs in his apartment, Jada was cleaning her dog's kennel, but then she thought she heard yelling. She dropped her supplies and headed outside to check what was going on, and there she saw Brian crumpled on the ground, bleeding from a gunshot wound to his head. Both Jada and the other roommate, who was also a teammate of Brian's, well, they were kind of jointly making the 911 call. Although CPR was administered at the scene, EMTs pronounced Brian dead shortly after arriving on the scene. The killer was just that, just a killer. Brian's expensive watch and car keys were at his side. His wallet was left untouched with more than $100 in cash resting inside. Brian had been shot in under 2 minutes of arriving in the parking lot. Now from here, the details get muddy. It has never been released how many suspected bullets were fired. Only one bullet landed in Brian. Other than that, we don't know. And back then, theories were what family had been left with for years. Was the killer hiding behind the dumpster? Did Brian know his killer? Was the killer the supposed phone call from earlier at practice? The mention of that call is not even in the initial police report, even though Brian's teammate said he definitely told police about it. Another thing, was the killer part of the gang violence experienced at the club a few weeks earlier? Or was the killer involved with the bad car deal that was handled over eBay? As teammates gathered at the Hurricanes practice facility once the announcement of Brian's death circulated, one teammate was noticeably absent. His name, Rashawn Jones. The same Rashawn Jones that had dated Jada, Brian's current girlfriend. Rashawn was in a bit of a trouble with the coaches. He had failed his third marijuana test and was suspended for the upcoming game. But he was supposed to be at that team meeting concerning Brian's death. When police tracked Rashawn down, he said he was home alone the entire evening of Brian's death. Rashawn also, years later, says he is sure he was at that team meeting called after Brian's death. But witness after witness is saying that it just is not true. He was not there. And one Miami student from back in 2006, well, they told ESPN, the magazine, that on the night of Brian's death, Rashawn had called them and asked for money to get out of town. Now, like I said earlier, Rashawn and Brian, they've got a history. They shared the same girlfriend, and there's fistfights at the team facility and plenty of chirping between the two. But one thing they weren't sharing, Brian's stock was rising and Rashawn's was falling. Rashawn was not turning out to be the football star that Brian was. Clearly, Rashawn is on the list of possible suspects. But we've got others. What about Jada's twin brother, the violent one? Well, eventually, after lots of interviews and dust-ups with police, Jada's twin brother was cleared. According to ESPN, he was trying hard to not be cleared, giving investigators nothing except attitude. But they did learn he wasn't even in Miami on the night of the killing. Police also cleared the eBay purchaser. Sure, that transaction was crappy, and Brian had delivered them a car without headlights and several other parts missing. But that buyer lived back in Arkansas, and there was no other connecting evidence to place them in Miami. Another lead that fizzled out was connected to the Haitian gang activity. Apparently, a man who was in trouble with ICE was connected peripherally to the gang that was involved in the club attack. That man had been sent back to Haiti once they kind of all figured it out. And as of today, records indicate he died in the rubble of the 2010 Haiti earthquake. Police weren't too keen on him being the killer anyway, but with him either dead or missing, that lead can't be tracked really any further. Now, up until 2021, the case was cold. And Jeanette, that's Brian's mom, who by then was suffering from health issues, well, she had never found peace. Jeanette says she has always been haunted by her youngest child's life being snuffed out right before he was to realize his dreams. Things seemed to turn around in August of 2021, though. Rashawn was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Most of the discovery evidence used to arrest Rashawn didn't seem to be, I don't want to say unearthed, but solidified. That's what I want to say. Like, most of that evidence didn't seem to be solidified by police. Instead, it was an investigative team with ESPN, the magazine, that really did that groundwork, that tough, gritty work. They turned over some interviews. They found some leads that weren't fully vetted. They gave all of that information to the police, and that then led to the arrest of Rashawn. Now, I'm sure police would take issue with the statement I just made about ESPN revitalizing the investigation, which then led to Rashawn's arrest. But source article after source article credits ESPN for the investigative work. Whomever it was, back in 2021, police were saying that a major reason for the arrest of Rashawn was testimony by an eyewitness who said they saw a man jogging away from the apartment complex, that area in the parking lot, just seconds after the witness said he heard a loud pop. 7 months after the date of Brian's murder, that witness, that man, picked Rashawn out of a police lineup. So who is this witness? Well, he worked for the University of Miami as a writing professor. His name? Paul Connor. And he was walking toward the apartment complex when he heard the supposed gunshot and saw who he thinks was Rashawn jogging past him. Paul just kept walking, and he didn't even know that Brian was bleeding in the parking lot. But 2 days after the murder, he saw a news report. He put 2 and 2 together and called police himself. He told his story, said he saw this type of guy, which matched Rashawn's description. He then worked with a sketch artist, and then he went on his way until 7 months later. Then, 7 months after the murder, he was invited back into the police headquarters and shown a photo array. From that photo spread, he identified Rashawn as the man running from the apartment complex. All right, from there, it's all put on hold. A cold case for 13 years until September of 2020. Now remember, the arrest happened in 2021, but we've got the ESPN investigation And we have something that's unearthed in that ESPN investigation, and it all comes to light in September of 2020. That's when Paul is called back into the police department. Again, he's shown a photo array, a lineup, and again, he chooses Rashawn's picture as the man that ran past him clear back in 2006. Now, with a trial date set for January of 2022, hearing after hearing stalled Rashawn's case. Finally, a date for trial was set for October 6th of this year, so just weeks away. What happened for the last 3+ years? Why all of the delays? Well, during that time, Rashawn has just been in jail, unable to post his $850,000 bond. And at the center of all the delays is the fact that Paul Connor, the prosecution's key witness, the university professor who picked Rashawn out of a lineup twice, well, Paul was supposedly now dead. The prosecution said they had lost track of Paul after filing the charges and that a database had them believing Paul had died. They even reaffirmed this death information to a judge as recently as July of this year. Except Paul hasn't died. And it wasn't the detectives or investigators or prosecution that found him alive in Kentucky. Again, it was a reporter from ESPN. ESPN doing the work in this case. See, Paul is now 81 years old. And in late August, that reporter from ESPN knocked on his door in Louisville. During that discovery contact with the ESPN reporter back in August, Paul said he was, quote, getting up there in years and that his memory comes and goes. He then allegedly asked the reporter when the death occurred. Well, last Friday, this new discovery had prosecutors back in front of the judge, explaining why they had said just weeks ago Paul was dead, and now they were saying that ESPN had found him alive. The prosecutor apparently admitted to the judge that Paul seems a little confused, and that the state would need to do further investigation to see if his testimony could be used in the trial next month. The judge said, "We're going to go ahead anyway with the trial." So it looks like Rashawn will stand trial in the first week of October for the murder of his teammate and romantic rival, Brian Pata. Rashawn's attorney, Sarah Alvarez, said the following to ESPN about the discovery of the once thought dead, now alive witness. She said, "I'm not shocked. I'm appalled. This is a bigger issue. This is just blatant lies, bald-faced lies. It's a shame and it's disgusting that you would be willing to send a man to prison for the rest of his life without any evidence, and then not be honest about what evidence exists and doesn't exist." Now, of course, I'm going to be watching this trial. Not just for the once thought dead, now alive Paul controversy, but also the testimony from Jada and other teammates. It's been nearly 20 years since Brian was gunned down in his apartment complex parking lot. I don't know if Rashawn's lawyer is incredibly qualified for this case, but if she is most likely going to have a field day dismantling the investigation by Miami police. I'll keep you updated on the trial. Let me know what you think in the comments. And now to Utah, where an 18-year-old, almost 19-year-old man has been charged with a slew of sexual crimes. And it all began with him hiding out in a 12-year-old's bedroom. The hidden crimes occurred right under the parents' noses in their home in Bluffdale, Utah. Now that's located right there in the Salt Lake City Valley. According to an arrest statement from September 8th, officers with the Bluffdale Police Department responded to a 911 call with a report of trespassing. When they began investigating the scene, authorities learned that 18-year-old Riker Buxton, who is almost 19 years old, by the way, well, he had secretly been hiding in the home of his 12-year-old victim. The parents were telling the police the 12-year-old had invited the suspect in to hide from the parents. And he had been hiding in that home for 10 days. At that point, the police removed Riker from the residence because he didn't have permission to be there, and he was let go to, I guess, go about living his life. The following week, on September 15th, the same parents called the same police department and said that their 12-year-old daughter had run away. They believed she had reunited with Riker. Then a day later, Riker and the underage victim were found 30 miles south in Provo, Utah. Provo police separated the two, and during their interrogation interviews, they got widely different stories. While the 12-year-old admitted to being with Riker the whole time she was missing from her home, she told detectives that she and Riker were not sexually involved. And Riker? Well, maybe he was proud of what he had, accomplished with the girl, or maybe he isn't the brightest bulb, or maybe he's just superior in his honesty. Whatever it was, he told officers that the two had engaged in multiple sex acts during the 10 days that he was hiding in her bedroom in her parents' home. And his description of the acts? Well, that description was so detailed that Riker was arrested for rape of a child, object rape of a child, sodomy of a child, and unlawful kissing. Now, of course, I ran to ChatGPT and looked up the penalty for unlawful kissing if found guilty. Unlawful kissing is a Class A misdemeanor in Utah, and a guilty person can be sentenced to a year in jail for that crime. It is important to note that Riker told police the following. When he referred to his victim, he said, quote, "She might legally be 12 years old, but she has the body of a 25-year-old. He then said he was in love with her and that the two want to have a child together. Riker has been arrested and is currently being held in the Salt Lake County Jail without bond. That will change once he receives his first hearing. This case made me wonder if this has happened before. Like a man hiding while parents have no idea who is in their home for days. Well, it has. In Stanley County, North Carolina, back in 2014, 27-year-old Jared Workman connected with a 14-year-old girl via social media. He is almost double her age. After a week of online chatting, the two decided to meet in person, and Jared selected an area near the girl's home that she shared with her mother. Once they met in person, the 14-year-old invited Jared back to her home. He stayed there, undetected, for the next 6 days, hiding in her closet. When they could get away with it, the two either forcefully engaged or consensually engaged in sex multiple times over the 6-day period. On the 6th day, the girl's mother opened the closet and found Jared hiding. Initially, the mother asked Jared how old he was, and he said 19. When she began to phone 911, he rushed past her and out of the home, leaving behind his wallet. The mother opened the wallet and realized the man hiding in her home was actually 27 years old. When deputies responded to the call, they used a canine to track Jared. His trail ran to a roadway where vehicle tracks were found, but the car was gone, and so was Jared. Now, it seems they knew who their guy was because of the left-behind wallet, but they first completed a forensic interview with the 14-year-old in which she told investigators she had been raped by Jared. Well, after it all came through, everything happened, police charged Jared with more than a dozen counts of statutory rape. Now, I checked to see if Jared was on the sex offender registry in North Carolina. He was not listed, and no source material follows up on his charges. Most likely they were pled down and didn't make headlines. This got me thinking, though. I was wondering if my kids could get away with hiding someone in my home for 5+ days back in the 2000s. I don't think so, but tell me what you think. Could you have gotten away with hiding someone in your bedroom in your parents' home? Let me know in the comments. And lastly today, a courtroom erupted in Florida on Tuesday when 59-year-old Ryan Routh attempted to stab himself in the neck with a ballpoint pen. Let me introduce you to Ryan Routh and his lengthy rap sheet. Ryan is a longtime resident of North Carolina, but interspersed into that is time spent in Hawaii. Ryan wasn't always employed, but he would often work in construction, doing a little bit of roofing here and there. And back in 2002, Ryan was involved in an incident in Greensboro, North Carolina, where he fled a traffic stop, then barricaded himself in a local business, armed with a fully semi-automatic gun, all while trying to run and hide from police. He was arrested after several hours and charged with possession of a weapon of mass destruction, among other charges. Also on that lengthy rap sheet is a felony conviction for possessing stolen goods. Now, this incident was back in 2010. It seems Ryan was found in possession of over 100 stolen items that were located in a storage unit. these kind of items you might find in your greedy little hands that you could take from construction sites. Inside the storage unit were power tools and building supplies. There was a hot tub, a kayak. The list just goes on and on. Ryan also had multiple arrests in the early 2000s for a hit and run, also for unlawfully carrying a concealed weapon, then for resisting arrest, and also for driving on a revoked license. Now, when war broke out with Ukraine and Russia, Ryan began a very public tour, turning up at multiple different protests and even finding himself in front of more than one news media microphone, begging for volunteers to help those in Ukraine. Then in 2023, Ryan self-published a book. That book was filled with rambling political arguments, one of them being that he begged Iran to assassinate the current presidential nominee. And then he allegedly took that task into his own hands, and he tried to unalive the Republican presidential nominee. This happened back on September 15th at the former President's International Golf Club in West Palm Beach. It seems Ryan cased the location for several days in his black Nissan Xterra. That SUV had stolen plates, but that didn't stop license plate readers in the area capturing the Xterra multiple times as it circled the golf course. On that Sunday, Secret Service agents saw a rifle protruding from a tree line. They immediately fired on the suspect, who ended up being Ryan, but Ryan fled the area. A witness caught Ryan on his phone camera, and that evidence spurred a bolo for Ryan Routh. 30 minutes later, Ryan was stopped in the Xterra on I-95, where he was arrested in the now famous footage that's been played on every cable news channel repeatedly. Inside the shooter's nest near the golf course, agents found a Chinese rifle with a scope. The serial number had been filed off. Also, zip-tied to the fence were 2 backpacks. Those backpacks were filled with supplies because cell site data eventually revealed that Ryan had been lying in wait for more than 10 hours in the shooter's nest. This last 2 weeks, Ryan has been acting as his own counsel in his federal case in a Florida courtroom. He had the legal right to do so, and he had tried to work with assigned counsel, but eventually they split ways and Ryan became a novice lawyer. During the trial, Ryan called only 3 witnesses, a firearms expert and 2 friends who were expected to act as character witnesses. The government called 38 witnesses who testified to the cell site data, the firearms found, forensics on the gun, and a backpack, and then also eyewitnesses from the scene. Ryan argued he didn't pull the trigger. So, how could he be charged with attempted murder? After 2 hours of deliberation, Ryan was found guilty on all 5 counts. Here's where it got crazy. After the jurors announced their verdict and they were filing out of the courtroom, Ryan grabbed a pen off the table in front of him and gave it a good effort. He jabbed and jabbed at his neck. But the pen, which is purposely flexible, so this kind of thing can't be successful, well, the pen just didn't puncture the skin. As marshals drug Ryan from the courtroom, Sarah Routh, that's Ryan's daughter, well, she started screaming, "I love you, Dad. Don't do anything. I'll get you out. He didn't hurt anybody." As Ryan was pulled through the side doors by deputies, Sarah kept screaming about the trial being rigged. Sarah herself was then escorted from the courtroom. Eventually, after many more minutes, Sarah and her brother Adam stood on the sidewalk outside watching the motorcade that drove their father away from the courthouse, all while Sarah again was screaming and crying. Now, Ryan will not be sentenced until December. He could face life in prison for the 5 guilty verdicts. Ryan also faces state charges of terrorism and attempted murder. That trial date is not yet set. Now, I found this courtroom behavior so interesting. Just follow me here. Ryan will appeal this case. Does he appeal on the grounds that he was not mentally stable and shouldn't have been allowed to represent himself? Did this, outburst in the courtroom lay the groundwork, whether it was natural or contrived? Did it lay the groundwork for that appeal? And then there was this. We had quite the debate a while back when I said during one of my cases that the courtroom bailiffs immediately cuffed the guilty defendant, even before the remaining charges were read. Some people told me that always happens. Some said he deserved to be cuffed that early. In reality, I did some checking. It doesn't always happen. But that's not the point here. I'm not arguing that one. I wanted to know if Ryan was cuffed when he attempted to stab himself in the neck. The answer is, it doesn't appear so. We have to rely on the courtroom sketch artist for the details, but that sketch does not show Ryan cuffed. If cuffed in the front of his body, he could have still reached his neck, but the sketches do not show cuffs. It would be interesting to hear the conversations between bailiffs and lawyers about their feelings surrounding this. And of course, the sketch artist could have not drawn the cuffs. I just find the process of different courtrooms so intriguing. Let me know what you think. And now, you guys, a quick thank you to all of you who sent DMs and also public messages to my sweet daughter with the passing of her sweet little 2-year-old cat. I was with her this weekend. She cried so many times. She is just really sad. She's missing her little sugar. You guys are extended family, and we don't take that for granted here. And then to Amber and others who kind of questioned Celeste's family asking for money after their daughter has been missing for more than a year. Their 13-year-old daughter who turned 14 while she was missing. This isn't the case with the musical artist David. You guys, I get you. I wanted to know more information about how much effort Celeste's family gave towards searching for their daughter and sister. Maybe the source material just didn't relay that information, but I looked, and that was one of many questions left unanswered. And for those who corrected me when I called David a rapper, again, I was taking that off source material. Apparently his style is more soulful than a rapper. I didn't listen to his music. I just searched out the crime details. So if he's not a rapper, really sorry about that. Now, I did do some quick checking to see if there have been any updates in the case. There are still no arrests. Some vigils have been held for Celeste, and her remains have been released to the family. Her funeral is scheduled for Saturday, October 4th. I'll keep watching that case. All right, that's your Thursday episode of Rise in Crime. Thank you for being here. Please, big favor on my part, share this episode with a friend. And also keep sending me your case suggestions. I love that. I love when we're sharing the same thoughts and ideas of what we want covered. Please give the podcast and the YouTube broadcast a like or a follow or a share or a thumbs up, whichever platform you're on. Make sure you do one of those things. It really does help the podcast grow. And we love 5-star reviews here at Oh No Media. The 3 Oh No Media podcasts are Murder with My Husband, Into the Dark, and Rise in Crime. You can join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.